Madam Speaker, I rise to make my contribution to this bill entitled An Act to Make Provision for the Management and Implementation of the Post-Disaster Reconstruction and Resilience Efforts consequent on the passage of Hurricane Melissa, and for resilience generally, to establish the National Reconstruction and Resilience Authority and for connected matters. The bill, when passed into law, to be cited as the National Reconstruction and Resilience Authority Act, NARRA. Madam Speaker, over the years that I have been in the Parliament, my starting point in presenting on bills is usually to look at the Memorandum of Objects and Reason. And this bill seeks to establish the National Reconstruction and Resilience Authority and a statutory framework for the efficient, coordinated, and transparent management of extraordinary time-bound reconstruction and resilience efforts to focus on building back better to withstand future climatic and geophysical events. Secondly, to create a more robust, climate-resilient infrastructure, encouraging better land use planning. Thirdly, to expedite private and public-private investment in priority sectors that address the structural economic vulnerabilities exposed by Hurricane Melissa. And fourthly, to enable growth and diversification of Jamaica's economic base. Madam Speaker, my training and experience compels me to not only look at a bill in principle, but also in detail. Because when we pass laws, we're not passing laws for the statute book, we're passing laws to be used. And constitutionally, we're passing laws for the peace, order, and good government of Jamaica. And when the laws are to be used, we have to discover the meaning or effect of words used by the Parliament. And to do so, we cannot escape analysis. Doesn't make an approach theoretical or theatrical. We really have to analyze, because the overriding aim must always be to give effect to the intention of Parliament as expressed in words used. And so the task of ascertaining the intention of Parliament, it demands an understanding that the intention of Parliament is an objective concept. It is not subjective. When we refer to the intention of Parliament, which is really to understand what it is that we're passing, this is to something that is objective and what we can reasonably impute to Parliament in respect of the language used. It is not the subjective intention of the minister or other persons who promote the legislation, nor is it the subjective intention of the draftsman or of individual members, or even a majority of individual members of either house. And so there is no escaping looking at what the words say and what we draft. Madam Speaker, this bill, as the Prime Minister has said, is the most consequential piece of legislation that is to be passed. And he invited all of us to approach the consideration of the bill seriously. And so, you know, we can't really rush it too much, even though time is of the essence. And I have a full appreciation of what the Prime Minister is seeking to achieve. I do not believe that anyone who has spoken has taken issue with the goals that are being pursued. But the concerns are whether the bill in its form will achieve those goals. Madam Speaker, the authority is to be constituted according, well, the clause 3 establishes the authority, and it tells us how it is to be constituted in accordance with the schedule. Now, some have taken issue with whether there is going to be a board or there isn't going to be a board, and the Prime Minister in his presentation indicated that we have other models in the jurisdiction where there is no board, and that is true. Under the Town and Country Planning Act, for example, there is provided for a planning authority, a Town and Country Planning Authority. And under that act, and this is an act of 1958, Section 3(1) tells you that for the purposes of the act, the minister shall appoint a person or persons to be a town and country planning authority, and subject to the provisions of the Act, and from time to time, by order, published in the Gazette, define the composition, powers, and duties of such authority. So it is true that what the bill is seeking to do by way of model already exists in the jurisdiction. So let us look at what will constitute the authority in the bill. The schedule speaks to a CEO and only a CEO. And so if the intention is to constitute the authority with a single office holder, then that is what will be achieved. But if that is not the intention, then the bill will require some rework. Now, the question naturally arises, in light of the objectives being pursued, whether a single person constituting the authority is the model that we should use. It is an appropriate question to be answered. But beyond that, essentially, the authority will also have the minister who is to step in. So in essence, the authority, when it boils down to it, will be the CEO and the minister who steps in when the minister so steps in. Now, the issue has been raised about the concentration of power. In many other pieces of legislation, power is concentrated in the minister. The question is whether, in light of the objectives being pursued, this is the model that should be used. That is the live question. No, the bill doesn't define which minister, a point that was made, but from all indications, it points to the Prime Minister who has portfolio responsibility for the subject matter in this current dispensation. But it would require an indication of which minister, since numerous other ministers have been named. So that is the first point. What does the authority look like? And the bill right now presents the authority as the CEO. And when the minister steps in, the CEO and the minister. But the bill does not say what qualifies someone to be appointed as the CEO. Again, it is not unusual because other legislation allows for appointments as the minister thinks fit. But when you see what we're seeking to do, would it be helpful to get a profile of what the CEO will look like? Competency profile, what would qualify someone to hold the office of CEO, since if the bill were to proceed in this form, that person would equate to the authority. Moving from move to the functions of the authority. Clause 4 sets out the functions. And as has been said before, the functions are very wide. What jumps out at me as against the memorandum of objects and reason is that some of the functions may collide with each other, for want of a better expression, so that we know it is not good practice for anyone to provide oversight duties to self. And so clause 4, when you read all of it, you're going to see that, for example, the function of procuring goods, works, and services for the implementation of projects, programs, and plans, and then the function of establishing project management, compliance, monitoring, reporting, and risk management systems necessary for timely, efficient, and effective performance of procurement contracts for the implementation of approved projects, programs, and plan may run the authority into some trouble and may invite all kinds of genuine concerns.
House Leader, time now being 7:20.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. With the time now being 7:20, we ask that the House be allowed to sit beyond 7:20.
Thank you. The question is that the time being 7:20 p.m., I put that the House be allowed to sit beyond 7:30 p.m. to complete the business of the day. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. The business of the House continues. Member from St. James Central, turn.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Madam Speaker. So what we find, based on how the bill is drafted, is that you can have self-oversight and you can have self-monitoring. Now, self-monitoring can take place, but I don't know that that is the kind of monitoring that you would want. It was my understanding that the authority would be monitoring other entities and someone else would be monitoring the authority without creating all of the duplications and all of the problems that we are so well aware of. Well, in the current form, the bill does not achieve that goal and would have to be reworked. The functions are also cast very wide. And, you know, the experience I've had tells me that when you can prevent some things ex ante or address them, you do so that you do not have to quarrel when you give power to someone and that power is exercised. And in this House, I have seen undignified quarrel breaking out about government exercising powers that are on the statute book, giving the impression as if something is wrong with that. Too many examples of it in this House. I do not subscribe to the school of thought which says that power granted shouldn't be exercised. I believe that if power is granted, it should be exercised. But I also subscribe to the school of thought which says it is not for a minister or an entity to determine the extent of the power that is granted under law, that the law itself must set it out and set it out clearly so that we do not then start quarreling as to whether action taken was actually intended. So when we say that anything can be done, it literally means anything can be done. And we have to consider carefully if this is the power we want to grant. I think the major concern raised by presenters relate to the taking over of powers that are vested in other entities to achieve the goal of rebuilding and reconstruction. And the Prime Minister spoke to the fragmented way in which things are done and the absence of a coordinated approach on a single platform. And it's really unfortunate that we are there because numerous efforts have been made to bring the entities under one umbrella. And the boards, in many pieces of our legislation, they are accountable to the ministers. And, it remains work in progress. So we can quarrel about what should or shouldn't be done. The truth is that we are at a stage where we don't have the track record of power being exercised in a way to get things done quickly. We don't have the track record of the rest of government approaching issues with the kind of urgency that we, the members of parliament, would require. And so I appreciate the ask for the step in power. Many times when I'm in my constituency and I'm reasoning with constituents, I say to them, government is not a one-man show. That the office of member of parliament or the political directorate is but a small, though powerful part of government. And a lot of what you ask of me as member of parliament is assigned to somebody else in government. And when the power is assigned to someone else, I can't exercise that power because it becomes an ultra vires exercise of power. Now, when you look on the legislation, the bill, the provisions are drafted very, very wide, very wide. And I have no doubt that that is done to allow things to progress. But here is the danger in that approach. A lot of what the bill would authorize to be done by either the authority, which would be the CEO, because the Clause 5 tells you that the CEO shall act on behalf of the authority and be responsible for the day-to-day management of the authority. And then in more than one place, the bill tells you that notwithstanding anything to the contrary in any other law, and also that when the minister steps in, When the minister steps in effect, the minister can do anything. That is how wide it is. So, and the step in order, clause 24, which we were directed to pay close attention to, tells you that the minister can approve, subject to any term or condition, an application made or submitted to the authority by the authority to an approving entity on which the approving entity has not made a decision, and then vary, modify, or remove a term, condition, or qualification to which an approval was made subject. And a step in order shall have effect in all respects in law, as if that step in order was an approval granted by the approving entity to which the authority first made application. Approving entity in clause 2 means the local authority, a local authority. And we know that under the Local Governance Act, the local authority is the municipal corporation, city municipalities, or town municipalities, or public body that exercises any statutory, regulatory, administrative, or operational function where the exercise of that function is required for the implementation, execution, or delivery of an approved construction and resilience project or a designated strategic investment project, including functions relating to physical planning and development control, building control, including the issuance of building permits and the conduct of inspections, land subdivision, land use and zoning, environmental management, natural resource conservation and environmental permits, approvals relating to water supply, sewage and drainage, roads, highways and transportation infrastructure, electricity, telecoms, and other utility service, and disaster risk management and hazard mitigation. So the stepping order to have the effect in all respects in law, as if the stepping order was an approval granted by the approving entity, will mean that the other processes that are involved will be impacted. Now, the Prime Minister said that you would not be sacrificing the accountability for speed, but in this current form, it will do that. So, for example, in looking at the approving entity, you know, I usually speak with my constituents about bills that are before the Parliament, a habit I got into very early. And all of these functions listed here would normally be carried out by the Planning and Environmental Committee, utilizing the Town and Country Planning Act, the Building Act, and the Local Improvement Act, among others. And you would have persons like, so you would have the council of the local authority, which would be all elected councillors. You have the NEPA. In the case, if I were to use the example of Montego Bay, where I did my research, you would have the Mobe Metro, JPS, Water Commission, NWC, Flow, Digicel, the city engineer. You would have a host the director of planning, the building, the city engineer, all of that. And in respect of the consultation, because all of these processes involve some level of consultation, and the bill is not omitting consultation, but it does not specify with whom the consultations should take place. But what we know is that where a law creates a duty to consult, or where there is a duty to consult, either because the law creates it or there is a consistent practice of consultation, the consultation has to be meaningful. And at least these criteria must be met. So the consultation has to be undertaken when the proposal is at a formative stage, the proposal to do whatever is to be done. Sufficient reasons must be given for the proposal to enable an informed response to be provided. Adequate time must be allowed for the response to the proposal. And then the product of the consultation must be conscientiously taken into account when the ultimate decision is being made. Where there is a duty to consult, fairness may also require disclosure to an interested party of the technical matters, technical advice on which a proposal is being made, on which you're going to have reliance. So the bill would need some reworking in order to achieve. Don't clap. Before you clap, the member and the minister have already said that time would be allowed to take into account all of the proposals, and you look at what amendments have to be made. So that is a decision that has already been taken. So, next point I wish to address. The bill uses what we collectively call statutory instrument, delegated legislation. So the bill is asking Parliament to grant very wide powers to the authority being the CEO and then the minister who steps in. Very, very wide. And then it is also asking that we delegate to the authority and the minister the power to also make laws. And the bill, so directions are to be given. Generally, directions do not take on the character of law. But the way that it is drafted in this bill, there is no doubt that those directions amount to law at a lower level. So the bill provides that a contravention of any direction under clause 13 shall not invalidate any transaction. That is at clause 13, subclause 4. The nature of the direction includes ensuring that approved reconstruction and resilience projects and designated strategic investment projects are implemented in accordance with the terms of the cabinet approval and public interest. But the way it is drafted, it begs the question as to what will happen if the contravention is so unreasonable that the minister or the authority could not be taken to have authorized it. And what if the contravention is done on grounds of bad faith, improper motive, or is just manifestly absurd? And what if private interest trumps the public interest? Now, it is true that not every contravention will vitiate an action.
Member from St. James West Central, you have 1 minute to wrap up.
Madam Speaker, the bill in its current form will not achieve the goals that are set.
Thank you, member.
Madam Speaker, this matter is so important. I don't know what motivates my colleagues on that side who are clapping, but I know that I am vested in the success of the actions of the government. And so, Madam Speaker, this is too important for us not to have the kind of buy-in and take into account the very valid concerns that have been raised. So, Madam Speaker, on that note, I invite the Prime Minister piloting the bill and the team to take into account the very valid points that have been made. The bill needs some reworking.
Thank you, member. Are there any other contributions? The member from Clarendon North Central. Member from Kingston Central. Who is saying they're going now?